Hi, my name is Adam Silverman, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys today. I think that, I hope that this is a little evocative, if not provocative. In this past June, after 30 years of being a private practicing general internist, chief population health officer, and the chief of a division of an academic division of general internal medicine, I left the provider side of healthcare. Essentially, I was wanting to make a bigger impact. I wanted to make a bigger impact at scale, and I wanted to work with really smart yet optimistic people, something that was missing where I was. I was also tired of feeling like Sisyphus, the guy pushing the rock to the top of the mountain only to have it fall back on him every time he pushed the rock to the top of the mountain. And even if I did manage to get it to the top, I'd walk back down to the bottom of the mountain and there'd be more rocks that needed to be moved. I'd also spent a decade tackling the triple aim, and then somebody made it the quadruple aim, and so the moonshot became the intergalactic journey. And here's where I'll be a little heretical. The triple aim was never going to happen. I think aspirationally it was brilliant. It provided focus, an agenda, lots of discussion, but operationally it was suicide. The status quo was and is just too entrenched, and there are just too many interested parties, and quite honestly, including ourselves. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at one of your 401k portfolios and tell me you don't have a health insurance company, a for-profit health company, or a pharma company in your portfolio. I believe that if we're going to make a difference with innovation, we need to really rethink the innovation agenda. Great thoughts and grand plans are wonderful if you want to become famous. But if you want to achieve, you need to think differently. The currency of fame are likes and tweets, but they're ephemeral and they really have no integrity. The currency of achievement, however, is in execution. Because only in execution do we create opportunities to learn, and only in execution do we get the ability to iterate and improve. Several days ago, I was fooling around on YouTube and I came across a video of Denzel Washington talking to a group of young actors, and he said something that really resonated with me. He said that dreams without goals are just dreams. And I think there's an analogy to what we do in innovation, and that analogy is that ideation without execution is just ideation. And it's not that ideation is bad. I mean, it's essential if we're going to innovate, but it in and of itself alone is not sufficient. Healthcare's troubles are just so large that we need innovation that really drives execution. And colleagues, our friends, our families, my mother, ourselves, we all really need ourselves to execute. So moving forward, I would suggest that as innovators, we reframe our notion of innovation from the pursuit of aspirational brilliance to the pursuit of what I call radical common sense. By radical common sense, I mean using existing tools, like ones we've heard today, to solve existing problems, like ones we've heard today. We also need to create business models that work for everyone, and we need to work to make healthcare more just and more equitable. And as I'm fond of saying, essentially we need to do the things that make our mothers proud of us. So let me demonstrate for you this concept of radical common sense and why I relocated from Connecticut to the Bay Area just 6 months ago. In talking to hundreds of patients and surveying hundreds of others, my colleagues and I at Syllable have come to recognize that there are at least 4 archetypes of a doctor-patient or a health system-patient relationship. And these archetypes are based on the length of the relationship as well as the emotional depth of the relationship. We describe this didn't show up very well. We describe on the upper right-hand side these long, deep relationships as intimate. These are relationships that are built on implicit trust, sort of what you would expect in a marriage, or maybe historically with a clergy person. But I would argue it's sort of the classic view, almost the Rockwellian view of the primary care relationship. On the long, shallow side of things, we have many of the relationships that we have throughout our lives. These are what I would term business or service relationships. They're warm and respectful relationships, or they're trust but verify relationships. And as I said, we have lots of them. It's kind of the relationship we have with our dental hygienist. It's probably the relationship that most of you, but not I, have with people that cut yours but not my hair. And I would submit that our work relationships are these types of relationships. Fewer of us have these short, deep relationships, these things that I call swift trust, because they usually develop in situations where individuals who don't know very much about each other or are unknown to one another are thrust together in a high risk or an urgent situation to work together. They're based on explicit trust or the understanding of a reputation or when standard operating procedure is in place. And it's basically, I trust you to do your job because I know how you've been trained. And even though I've never worked with you, I know how you've been trained and you have a reputation of performing excellently. So I can trust you to do your job. And these are what we would usually see in airline crews or disaster relief agency workers and perhaps in trauma surgery. Now, on the short, shallow side of things, these are the ubiquitous relationships that we've come to expect in our, you mentioned, e-commerce lives, and that's sort of what we expect. That's how we do our banking now. That's how my wife is making a reservation for dinner for us tonight after we get done here. These are, if they're done well, they're fast and accurate. And I would submit that in healthcare, there's an opportunity to do these transactional relationships better and actually to introduce some things that had not been considered transactional, perhaps screening for low-risk populations for things like a colonoscopy, that can be more transactional, not because that I want it to become just fast and accurate, but by establishing speed and accuracy and ease of use, it helps to develop a better relationship between the patient and the health system. Now, historically, these intimate relationships in the upper right-hand corner or the upper left-hand corner for you were defined by time. Not because it takes a lot of time to develop an intimate relationship, but historically there were no other elements that needed to be taken care of. There was not really a cascade of transactions that needed to be successfully executed. My father, when he went to the doctor 50 years ago, did just that. He went to the doctor. It was either a good experience or it wasn't. If it was a good experience, the relationship grew. And in talking to patients, there really seems to be a yearn to return to this sense of intimacy or have an intimate relationship of some sort. People are craving recognition just as a person, not as a policy plan holder. But today there are just so many transactions that get in the way, right? From insurance verification to just answering the phone in the physician's office, to callback requests, to making appointments, to getting directions. Each of these transactions, if they're done well, reinforces a positive relationship. But any one done poorly leads to a bad experience and probably a negative review. And the same analogy works for health systems and the folks that work in health systems ourselves. So there are dozens of transactions that we do on a daily basis as an employee that's frustrating as heck. But if it's done really well, it makes the employee happy. But if it's not done well, then we end up with unhappy employees who are less productive. Now, intimacy used to be the foundational relationship. What I would argue today is that transactions now become the foundational relationship on which rebuilding that sense of intimacy will develop. If we in healthcare can figure out these transactional elements and do them better, do them fast and do them accurately, then we have a much better chance at getting to the higher order issues of really establishing that intimacy and that deep trust that people have together. So in healthcare, as innovators, as well as current and future patients, we need to focus on creating this stable transactional foundation for healthcare. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing that we've heard today are tools that can create a digital assistant that can not only create accurate, fast, and reliable solutions for healthcare transactions, but they can also confer a bit of intimacy by expressing knowledge of the user. So focusing AI on pedestrian common problems can result in improved experiences for patients, providers, and employees. Once we solve these problems, we can move on to grander applications. Now, I know this doesn't sound sexy, but healthcare needs to socialize AI a little bit more, and AI needs to learn more about healthcare, not just medicine. As an analogy, you don't get to become a Jedi Knight until you become a really good Padawan learner. So how does this all relate to radical common sense? Well, in 2020, my colleagues and I at Syllable are going to focus on that transaction. We're going to develop AI solutions and deploy them that, among other things, will make it easy to find a doctor, that will make it easy for a healthcare provider to do a simple administrative task like change their password without talking to a human being. And we're going to make it easy for a patient with an undifferentiated medical condition find the right provider and the right site of care the first time. In doing so, we're going to help our providers and our partners develop a stronger foundation on which to build an intimate brand and a roadmap to deliver better care that not only delivers an inspirational experience, but delights patients and colleagues along the way. And we're going to do it at a lower cost. I'm done. Thank you.